19 Nocturne Boulevard.
Nocturne Boulevard? Not far. When you hit Howard, hang a right. Howard meets Phillip at a weird kind of angle, and then you cross James and Poe. You can't miss Nocturne. It's just past the Ottoman.
19 Nocturne Boulevard. Your address for suspenseful stories of the speculative, strange, and supernatural.
Tonight I bring you a trilogy for Christmas. Yes, this is 19 Nocturne Boulevard. Won't you step inside? Did you have any trouble finding it? Well, sit right down. I want to read you my favorite Christmas stories. No, don't go. Oh, please. Do I seem the type to offend with yet another rendition of A Christmas Carol? Or The Night Before Christmas? Even The Velveteen Rabbit, which is a truly disturbing tale to any small child, is far too common for this house. Indulge me, won't you? I promise I won't disappoint. I've selected 3 of my most favorite Christmas tales to share with you. And even if one is a bit romantic and sentimental, well, you have to let me be girly sometimes, right? So I'll get sentiment out of the way and move right into the more meaty stories. The first story, then, is Scruts by Arnold Bennett. Emily Wrackgarth stirred the Christmas pudding till her right arm began to ache, but she did not cease for that. She stirred on till her right arm grew so numb that it might have been the right arm of some girl at the other end of Bursley, and yet something deep down in her whispered,
"It is your right arm, and you can do what you like with it."
She did what she liked with it. Relentlessly she kept it moving till it reasserted itself as the arm of Emily Wrackgarth, prickling and tingling as with red-hot needles in every tendon from wrist to elbow. And still Emily Wrackgarth hardened her heart.
"Mine! You are mine!"
Presently she saw the spoon no longer revolving, but wavering aimlessly in the midst of the basin.
Ridiculous. This must be seen to.
In the down of dark hairs that connected her eyebrows, there was a marked deepening of that vertical cleft which, visible at all times, warned you that here was a young woman not to be trifled with. Her brain dispatched to her hand a peremptory message, which miscarried. The spoon wabbled as though held by a baby.
Ah!
Emily knew that she herself, as a baby, had been carried into this very kitchen to stir the Christmas pudding. Year after year, as she grew up, she had been allowed to stir it for luck. And those, she reflected, were the only cookery lessons she ever got.
How like mother.
Mrs. Wrackgarth had died in the past year of a complication of ailments. Her father had died in the year previous to that of a still more curious and enthralling complication of ailments. Joss, his son, carried on the Wrackgarth works.
And I kept house for Joss. I, with my own hand, made this pudding. But for me, this pudding would not have been. Fantastic! Utterly incredible.
And yet so it was. She was grown up. She was mistress of the house. She could make or unmake puddings at will. And yet she was Emily Wrackgarth, which was absurd.
It is doubtful whether the people of southern England have yet realised how much introspection there is going on all the time in the 5 towns.
Emily was now stirring the pudding with her left hand. The ingredients had already been mingled indistinguishably in that rich, undulating mass of tawniness which proclaims perfection. But Emily was determined to give left hand, not less than her right, what she called
a doin'.
Emily was like that. At midday, when her brother came home from the works, she was still at it.
Brought those struts with you?
That's a fact.
And he dipped his hand into the sagging pocket of his coat. It is perhaps necessary to explain what scruts are. In the daily output of every pot bank, there are a certain proportion of flawed vessels. These are cast aside by the foreman
with a lordly gesture,
and in due course are hammered into fragments. These fragments, which are put to various uses, are called scruts. and one of the uses they are put to is a sentimental one.
The dainty and luxurious southerner looks to find in his Christmas pudding a wedding ring, a gold thimble, a threepenny bit, or the like. To such foul isles, the Five Towns would say, "Bye."
A Christmas pudding in the Five Towns contains nothing but suet, flour, lemon peels, cinnamon, brandy, almonds, raisins, and 2 or 3 scruts. There is a world of poetry, beauty, romance in scruts, though you have to have been brought up on them to appreciate it. Scruts have passed into the proverbial philosophy of the district.
"Him's a pudding with more scruts and raisins to 'em,"
is a criticism not infrequently heard. It implies respect, even admiration. Joss had emptied out from his pocket onto the table a good 3 dozen of scruts.
I laid aside my spoon, rubbed the palms of my hands on the bib of my apron, and proceeded to finger these scruts with the air of a connoisseur, rejecting one after another.
The pudding was a small one, designed merely for herself and Joss, with remainder to the girl, so that it could hardly accommodate more than 2 or 3 scruts.
I knew well enough that one scrut is as good as another, yet I did not want my brother to feel that anything selected by M would necessarily pass muster.
For his benefit, she ostentatiously wrinkled her nose.
By the way, you remember Albert Grapp? I've asked him to step over from Hanbridge and help me have a snack on Christmas Day.
You've asked that Mr. Grapp?
No objection, I hope. He's not a bad sort, and he's considered a bit of a ladies' man, you know.
Ah!
Emily gathered up all the scruts and let them fall in a rattling shower on the exiguous pudding. 2 or 3 fell wide of the basin.
I made sure they all fit, too.
Steady on. What's that for?
That's for your guest. And if you think you're going to palm me or phone it in, or on any other young fellow, you're a fool, Joss Wrackgarth.
I would never.
Don't think I don't know what you've been after just of late. Cracking up one young sonny and then another on the chance of me marrying him. I never heard of such goings-on. But here I am, and here I'll stay, as sure as my name's Emily Wrackgarth, Joss Wrackgarth.
It is difficult to write calmly about Emily at this point. For her, in another age, ships would have been launched and cities besieged, but brothers are a race apart and blind. It's a fact that Joss would have been glad to see his sister settled.
Preferably in one of the other 4 towns.
She took up the spoon and stirred vigorously. The scruts grated and squeaked together around the basin, while the pudding feebly wormed its way up among them.
Is it me? Oh, Albert Grapp, ladies' man though he was humble of heart, and nobody knew this but himself.
Not one of his fellow clerks in Clither's Bank knew it. The general theory in Hanbridge was, him's got a stiff opinion of hisself.
But this arose from what was really a sign of humility in him. He made the most of himself.
He had, for instance, a way of his own in the manner of dressing. He always wore a voluminous frock coat with a pair of neatly striped vicuna trousers,
which he placed every night under his mattress, thus preserving in perfection the crease down the centre of each.
Stop referring to yourself in the third person. No one else does. On wet days he wore a mackintosh. This, as he did not yet possess a greatcoat, he wore also, but with less glory, on cold days.
He had hoped there might be rain on Christmas morning, but there was no rain. Oh, just like my luck.
Since Joss Wrackgarth had introduced Albert to his sister at the Hanbridge Oddfellows biennial hop,
when I danced 2 quadrilles with her.
He had seen her but once. He had nodded to her 5 towns fashion, and she had nodded back at him, but with a look that seemed to say,
"You needn't nod next time you see me. I can get along well enough without your nods."
A frightening girl. And yet her brother had since told me she seemed a bit gone-like on me. Oh, impossible! He, Albert Grapp, make an impression on the brilliant Miss Wrackgarth. Yet she had sent him a verbal invite to spend Christmas in her own home.
You're doing it again.
And the time had come. He was on his way. Incredible that he should arrive. The tram must surely overturn or be struck by lightning, and yet, no! He arrived safely.
The small servant who opened the door gave him another verbal message from Miss Wrackgarth. "Wipe your feet well on the mat." In obeying this order, he experienced a thrill of satisfaction he could not account for. He must have stood shuffling his boots vigorously for a full minute.
This, he told himself, was life. He, Albert Grapp, was alive, and the world was full of other men, all alive, and yet, because they were not doing Miss Wrackgarth's bidding, none of them really lived.
In the parlor, he found Joss awaiting him. The table was laid for 3.
"So you're here, are you?"
said the host, using the 5 Towns formula.
"Emily's in the kitchen. Happen she'll be here directly."
I hope she's tall lollish.
"She is, but don't you go saying that to her. She doesn't care about society airs and graces. You'll make no headway if you aren't blunt."
Oh, right you are.
A moment later, Emily joined them, still wearing her kitchen apron.
So you're here, are you?
She said, but did not shake hands. The servant had followed her in with the tray, and the next few seconds were occupied in the disposal of the beef and trimmings. The meal began, Emily carving.
The main thought of a man less infatuated than Albert Grapp would have been, "This girl can't cook, and she'll never learn to." The beef, instead of being red and brown, was pink and white. Uneatable beef!
And yet he relished it more than anything he had ever tasted. This beef was her own handiwork. Thus it was because she had made it so... happen I could do with a bit more, like?
Emily hacked off the bit more and jerked it onto the plate he had held out to her. Only when the second course came on did he suspect that the meal was a calculated protest. This, a Christmas pudding? The litter of fractured earthenware was hardly held together by the suet and raisins.
All his pride of manhood, and there was plenty of pride mixed up with Albert Grapp's humility, dictated a refusal to touch that pudding. Yet he soon found himself touching it, though gingerly, with spoon and fork.
In the manner of dealing with scruts, there are 2 schools, the old and the new. The old school pushes its head well over its plate and drops the scrut straight from its mouth. The new school emits the scrut into the fingers of the left hand, and therewith deposits it on the rim of the plate.
Albert noticed that Emily was of the new school.
Oh, I give up.
But might she not despise as affectation in him what came natural to herself? On the other hand, if he showed himself as a prop of the old school, might she not set her face the more stringently against him?
The chances were that whichever course he took would be the wrong one.
It was then that he had an inspiration, an idea of the sort that comes to a man once in his life and finds him, likely as not, unable to put it into practice.
Albert was not sure he could consummate this idea of his. He had indisputably fine teeth.
A proper mouthful of grinders.
In local phrase. But would they stand the strain he was going to impose on them? He could but try them. Without a sign of nervousness, he raised his spoon, with 1 scrut in it, to his mouth. This scrut he put between 2 of his left side molars, bit hard on it, and, eternity of that moment, felt it and heard it snap in 2.
He was conscious that at the sound of the percussion, Emily started forward and stared at him. But he did not look at her.
That was none so dusty.
Calmly, systematically, with gradually diminishing crackles, he reduced that scrut to powder and washed the powder down with a sip of beer. While he dealt with the second scrut, he talked to Joss about the Borough Council's proposal to erect an electric power station on the site of the old gasworks down Hillport Way.
He was aware of a slight abrasion inside his left cheek. No matter. He must be more careful.
There were 6 scruts still to be negotiated.
He knew that what he was doing was a thing grandiose, unique, epical, a history-making thing, a thing that would outlive marble and the gilded monuments of princes. Yet he kept his head.
He did not hurry, nor did he dawdle. Scrut by scrut he ground slowly, but he ground exceeding small.
And while he did so, he talked wisely and well.
He passed from the power station to a first edition he had picked up for sixpence in Liverpool, and thence to the Midland's proposal to drive a tunnel under the Knype Canal so as to link up the main line with the Critchworth and Settleford loop line.
I was too amazed to put in a word, but sat nearly gaping. A gape that merged by imperceptible degrees into a grin. Presently I ceased to watch our guest. I sat watching my sister.
Not once did Albert himself glance in her direction. She was just a dim silhouette on the outskirts of his vision.
But there she was, unmoving, and he could feel the fixture of her unseen eyes. The time was at hand when he would have to meet those eyes. Would he flinch? Was he master of himself?
The last scrut was powder. No temporizing. He jerked his glass to his mouth.
A moment later, holding out his plate to her, he looked Emily full in the eyes. They were Emily's eyes, but not hers alone. They were collective eyes, that was it. They were the eyes of stark, staring womanhood.
Her face had been dead white, but now suddenly up from her throat, over her cheeks, through the down between her eyebrows went a rush of color, up over her temples, through the very parting of her hair.
Happen I'll have a bit more like?
Emily flung her arms forward on the table and buried her face in them. It was a gesture wild and meek. It was the gesture foreseen and yet incredible. It was recondite, inexplicable, and yet obvious.
It was the only thing to be done, and yet, by gum, I had done it.
Her brother had risen from his seat and was now at the door.
Think I'll step round to the works and see if they banked up that furnace, all right?
Note: the author has in preparation a series of volumes dealing with the life of Albert and Emily Grapp. Sweet romance, eh? Well, I've indulged my sentimental side. Now how about some gritty police work?
Hold up. You really think I'll get itched over some fellow who sops pottery?
That's how the story ends. And he's a good-looking chap.
And your accent is wretched.
Go back to your story.
Won't.
Your story's over. Shut up.
Can't make me. You're no better than me. I've 10 toes and 10 fingers just the same.
I'll close the book, and then you'll be gone until someone else reads you. And you're far enough out of print, that won't happen anytime soon.
Right. I'll sit here then, shall I?
Don't care. Just keep quiet. My next tale is PC X36 by Rudyard Kipling.
Then it's call him tight in the name of the Lord. Hustle him, shake him till he's sick. What he would he well. Then you've got to give him hell, and it's trunch, 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 and does the trick.
From Police Station Ditties.
Sounds like a donkey.
Shh!
I'd spent Christmas Eve at the club, listening to a grand powwow between certain of the choicer sons of Adam.
Hold on. I'm the one reading this story.
But I'm the narrator.
You tell her.
I'm the reader. You need to keep quiet.
You might have thought first before taking on a first-person narrative, mightn't you?
Well, I'll endeavor to sound like you. Now wait for your cue. Then Slushby had cut in. Slushby is one who writes to newspapers and is theirs obediently humanitarian. When Slushby cuts in, men remember they have to be up early next morning.
Sharp a corner on the way home, I collided with something firmer than the regulation pillar box.
I righted myself after the recoil and saw some stars that were very pretty indeed. Then I perceived the nature of the obstruction.
Evening, Judlip, I said sweetly, when I collected my hat from the gutter. Have I broken the law, Judlip? If so, I'll go quiet.
It's time you was in bed. Your ma'll be looking out for you.
This from the friend
of my bosom. It hurt. Many were the night beats I had been privileged to walk with Judlip, imbibing curious lore that made glad the civilian heart of me. 7-whole 8x5-inch notebooks had I pitmanized him with Judlip.
And now, to be repulsed as one of the uninitiated. It ain't horrid.
Don't you start in again.
Ha!
Don't. There is a thing called dignity. Small boys sometimes stand on it. Then they have to be kicked. Then they get down weeping. I don't stand on dignity.
What's wrong, John Judlip? I asked more sweetly than ever. Drawn a blank tonight?
Yes. Drawn a blank, blank, blank. I haven't had so much as a kick at a lost dog. Christmas Eve ain't what it was.
I felt for my notebook.
Lord, I remembers the time when the drunks and disorderlies down this street was as thick as flies on flypaper. One just picked him off with one's finger and thumb. A bloomin' buffet, that's what it was.
The night's yet young, Judlip, I insinuated, with a jerk of my thumb at the flaring windows of the Rat and Bloodhound. At that moment...
The saloon door swung open, admitting a man and woman who walked with linked arms and exceeding great care.
How sweet.
Judlip eyed them longingly as they tacked up the street. Then he sighed. Now when Judlip sighs, the sound is like unto that which issues from the vent of a Crosby boiler when the cog gauges are at 260 degrees.
Come, Judlip, I said. Possess your soul and patience. You'll soon find someone to make an example of. Meanwhile, I threw my head back and smacked her lips. The usual, Judlip?
In another minute, I emerged through the swing door, bearing a furtive glass of that same usual, and nipped down the mews where my friend was wont to await these little tokens of esteem.
To majesty of the law, Judlip.
When he had honored the toast, I scooted back with the glass, leaving him wiping the beads off his beard bristles. He was in his philosophic mood when I rejoined him at the corner.
What am I? A bloomin' cipher. What's the sergeant? He's got the inspector over him. Over above the inspector there's a superintendent. And over above him there's the old red tape masticating yard. Over above that there's the home sec. What's he? A cipher like me. Why?
Judlip looked up at the stars.
Over above him's we don't know what. Something what issues its orders and regulations and divisional injunctions inscrutable like, but brimply. And we has to see as how they're carried out. Not asking no questions, but each man going about his duty.
His duty, said I, looking up from my notebook. Yes, I've got that.
Life ain't a bean feast. It's a harsh reality. And them as makes it a bean feast has got to be harshly dealt with according. That's what the force is put here for from above. Not as how we ain't fallible. We makes our mistakes, and when we makes our mistakes, we sticks to 'em. With the honour of the force, which same as the jewel Britannia wears on her bosom as a charm against anarchy. That's what the blasted old beaks don't understand. You remember Smithers of our div?
I remembered Smithers well. As fine, upstanding, square-toed...
Bullet-headed, clean-living, go on, son of a gun.
Ta! As ever perjured himself in the box. There was nothing of the softy about Smithers. Took off my billycock to Smithers' memory.
Sacrifice to public opinion? Yes.
Judlip paused at the front door, flashing his light down the slot of a 2-grade Yale.
Sacrifice to a parcel of screaming old women what ought to have gone down on their knees and thank God for such a protector. He'll be out in another half year. What'll he do then, poor devil? Go a bust on his conduct money and throw in his lot with the same experts what had a holy terror on him?
Then Judlip swore gently.
What should you do, O Great One, if ever it were your duty to apprehend him?
Do? Why, you blessed innocent. You don't think I'd shirk a fair clean cop? Same time, I don't say as how I wouldn't handle him tender-like, for sake of what he was. Likewise, 'cause he'd be a stiff custom-made tackle. Likewise...
He had broken off, and was peering fixedly upward across the moonlit street.
Hello?
Back off!
I made a good go.
Striking an average between the direction of his eyes, for Judlip, when on the job, has a soul-stirring squint, I perceived someone in the act of emerging from a chimney pot. Judlip's voice clove the silence.
What are you doing up there?
The person addressed came to the edge of the parapet.
I saw then that he had a hoary white beard, a red ulster with the hood up, and what looked like a sack over his shoulder.
Not so very odd to pass it round, is it?
He said something or other in a voice like a concertina that has been left out in the rain.
I dare say. You come on down, and we'll see about that.
The old man nodded and smiled. Then, as I hoped to be saved, he came floating gently down through the moonlight, with the sack over his shoulder and the young fir tree clasped to his chest. He alighted in a friendly manner on the curb beside us.
Come along. Let us have a go.
Judlip was the first to recover himself.
Fine, let's just keep it moving.
Out went his right arm.
And the airman was slung round by the scruff of the neck, spilling his sack on the road.
I made a beeline for his shoulder blades. Burglar or no burglar, he was the best airman out, and I was muchly desirous to know the precise nature of the apparatus under his ulster.
A backhander from Judlip's left caused me to hop quickly aside. The prisoner was squealing and whimpering. He didn't like the feel of Judlip's knuckles at his cervical vertebrae.
What was you doing up there?
Asked Judlip, tightening the grip.
I'm Santa Claus, sir. Please, sir, let me go.
Hold him, I shouted. He's a German.
It's my duty to caution you that whatever you say now may be used in evidence against you, you old sinner. Pick up that there sack and come along with me.
The captive snivelled something about peace on earth, goodwill toward men.
Yes, that's in the New Testament, ain't it? The New Testament contains some uncommon nice reading for old gents and young ladies, but it ain't included in the library of the force. We confine ourselves to the Old Testament, O.T. Ought, and ought you'll get it. Up with a sack and quick march.
I have seen worse attempts at a neck wrench, but it was just not slippery enough for Judlip.
And the kick that Judlip then let fly was a thing of beauty and a joy forever.
Frogs march him, I shrieked, dancing. For the love of heaven, frogs march him.
Trotting by Judlip's side to the station, I reckoned it out that if Slushby had not been at the club, I should have not been here to see. Which shows that even Slushbies are put into this world for a purpose. Oh, this is just getting silly.
Only just. I should have said it's been a laugh for several miles now.
Do you have some problem with a bit of a laugh?
The third story I want to read is very serious. If this goes on, I won't be able to do it justice.
What is it then?
The Feast by Joseph Conrad.
Conrad? He wrote a Christmas story?
Who is this Conrad fellow?
Wrote something called The Heart of Darkness.
Yes, look, it's all ruined now. I'm just gonna give up and read The Night Before Christmas.
That sentimental pap?
The mood is gone.
What do you think?
Okay.
We might...
Let me.
I don't think so. Look, you... I think we've not been introduced.
Olivia.
Right. Olivia. Why not let us help read the story? Oh, we can do that well enough, can't we?
Certainly.
And keep the comments to a minimum?
Well...
Or box his ears for you if he steps across the line.
It's worth a try. The hut in which slept the white man was on a clearing between the forest and the river.
Silence. The silence murmurous and unquiet of a tropical night brooded over the earth that, baked through by the sun, sweated a vapor beneath the cynical light of the stars.
Mahamo lay rigid and watchful at the hut's mouth. In his upturned eyes and along the polished surface of his lean body, black and immobile, the stars were reflected, creating an illusion of themselves who are illusions.
The roofs of the congested trees, writhing in some kind of agony, private and eternal, made tenebrous and shifty silhouettes against the sky, like shapes cut out of black paper by a maniac who pushes them with his thumb this way and that, irritably, on a concave surface of blue steel.
Resin oozed unseen from the upper branches to the trunks swathed in creepers that clutched and interlocked with tendrils venomous, frantic, and faint.
Down below, by force of habit, the lush herbage went through the farce of growth, that farce old and screaming, whose trite end is decomposition. Optimist, eh?
Shh.
Ouch.
Within the hut, the form of the white man, corpulent and pale, was covered with a mosquito net that was itself illusory like everything else, only more so. Flying squadrons of mosquitoes inside its meshes flickered and darted over him, working hard, but keeping silence so as not to excite him from sleep.
Cohorts of yellow ants disputed him against cohorts of purple ants, the two kinds slaying one another in thousands. Ugh.
The battle was undecided, when suddenly, with no such warning as it gives in some parts of the world, the sun blazed up over the horizon, turning night into day, and the insects vanished back into their caps.
The white man ground his knuckles into the corners of his eyes, emitting that snore, final and querulous, of a middle-aged man awakened rudely. With a gesture brusque but flaccid, he plucked aside the net and peered around.
The bales of cotton cloth, the beads, the brass wire, the bottles of rum had not been spirited away in the night. So far, so good.
The faithful servant of his employers was now at liberty to care for his own interests. He regarded himself, passing his hands over his skin.
Ah, hi, Mahamo! I've been eaten up!
The islander, with one sinuous motion, sprang from the ground, through the mouth of the hut. Then after a glance he threw high his hands in thanks to such good and evil spirits as had charge of his concerns. In a tone half of reproach, half of apology, he murmured,
You white men sometimes say strange things that deceive the heart.
Reach me that ammonia bottle, do you hear? This is a pretty place you've brought me to. Christmas Day, too. Of all the... Yeah. But I suppose it seems all right to you, you heathen, to be here on Christmas Day.
We are here on day appointed, Mr. Williams. It is a feast day of your people.
Mr. Williams had lain back, with closed eyes on his mat. Nostalgia was doing duty to him for imagination.
He was wafted to a bedroom in Marylebone, where, in honour of the day, he lay late, dozing with great contentment. Outside, a slush of snow in the street, the sound of church bells. From below, a savour of a special cookery.
Yes, it's a feast day of my people.
Of mine also.
Is it, though, that they'll do business first?
They must first do that.
And they'll bring their ivory with them?
Every man will bring ivory.
The islander answered with a smile, gleaming and wide.
How soon will they be here?
Has not the sun risen? They are on their way.
Well, I hope they'll hurry. The sooner we're off this cursed island of yours, the better. Take all those things out.
Mr. Williams added, pointing to the merchandise.
And arrange them. Neatly, mind you.
In certain circumstances, it is right that a man be humoured in trifles. Mahamo, having borne out the merchandise, arranged it very neatly.
While Mr. Williams made his toilette, the sun and the forest, careless of the doings of white and black men alike, waged their warfare implacable and daily. The forest from its inmost depths sent forth perpetually its legions of shadows that fell dead in the instant of exposure to the enemy, whose rays, heroic and absurd, its outposts annihilated.
What's all this to do with Christmas?
Want me to cover one?
It takes place on Christmas Day. They already said that.
But this is all jungle creepers and spooky shadows and vermins. If there's one thing that doesn't come to my mind when I think of Christmas, it's ants and mosquitoes and such.
You should see some of the places I've been.
Why don't we just finish the story?
There came from those inilluminable depths the equitable rumour of myriads of winged things and crawling things newly roused to the task of killing and being killed. Thence detached itself, little by little, an insidious sound of a drum beaten. This sound drew more near. Aha, I see where this is going. Drums in the distance are never a good sign.
Maybe I haven't travelled all over the great wide world, fellow, but even I can probably guess at that.
Mr. Williams, issuing from the hut, heard it and stood gaping towards it.
Is that them?
That is they.
The islander murmured, moving away toward the edge of the forest.
Does he not notice? What sort of a dullard is he? Do you have a gun?
Oh.
Calm down. It's just a story.
Don't go telling me when to calm down. I just hate stories where stupid people do very stupid things. What possessed this fool to sail half round the world anyway?
Sounds of chanting were a now audible accompaniment to the drum.
What's that they're singing?
They sing of their business.
Oh. I'd have thought they'd be singing of their feast.
It is of their feast they sing.
It has been stated that Mr. Williams was not imaginative.
Oh, I say.
Oh, no, you stay put.
But a few years of life in climates alien and intemperate had disordered his nerves. There was that in the rhythms of him which made bristle his flesh.
Suddenly, when they were very near, the voices ceased, leaving a legacy of silence more sinister than themselves. And now the black spaces between the trees were relieved by bits of white that were the eyeballs and teeth of Mahamo's brethren.
It was of their feast. It was of you they sang.
I knew it!
It was obvious.
Oh, look here.
Cried Mr. Williams in his voice of a man not to be trifled with.
Look here, if you've got... Ah!
He was silenced by sight of what seemed to be a young sapling sprung up from the ground within a yard of him. A young sapling, tremulous, with a root of steel.
Then a thread-like shadow skimmed the air, and another spear came impinging the ground within an inch of his feet.
As he turned in his flight, he saw the goods so neatly arranged at his orders, and there flashed through him, even in the thick of the spears, the thought that he would be a grave loss to his employers.
This, for Mr. Williams, was, not less than the goods, of a kind easily replaced, was an illusion. It was the last of Mr. Williams' illusions.
So, what shall we do now?
Happy holidays, all, wherever and whatever they may be. Now that you know how to find us, don't be a stranger. We have enough of those already. Tonight's episode, A Trilogy for Christmas, was adapted by Julie Hoverson from the stories Scruts by Arnold Bennett, PC X36 by Rudyard Kipling, and The Feast by Joseph Conrad, as they appeared in the collection A Christmas Garland, edited by Max Beerbohm and published in 1912, and which is available from the Project Gutenberg website. In this production, Olivia was Julie Hoverson, Emily Wrackgarth was Beverly Poole, Joss Wrackgarth was Russell Gold, Albert Grapp was Gareth Bowley, Kipling's narrator was Rick Lewis, PC Judlip was Cole Hornaday, Mahamo was Pat McNally, and Mr. Williams was Michael Coleman of Tales of the Extraordinary. Also heard, Renaud LeBeouf. Music was found on Incompetech.com, performed by Kevin MacLeod. Sound and editing by Julie Hoverson. Some sound effects were found on Soundsnap.com. Questions, comments, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at 19nocturne@live.com or visit our website at www.19nocturneboulevard.net. This production is copyright 2008 to Julie Hoverson and Reality Productions. The white man ground his knuckles into the corners of his eyes, emitting that snore, final and querulous, of a middle-aged man awakened rudely.
The bales of cotton cloth, the beads, the brass wire, the bottles of rum have not been spirited away in the night. So far, so good.
The faithful servant of his employers was now at liberty to care for his own interests. He regarded himself, passing his hands over his skin.
Help! I'm being eaten up!
The islander, with one sinuous motion, sprang from the ground, through the mouth of the hut. Then, after a glance, he threw high his hands in thanks to such good and evil spirits as had charge of his concerns.
You white men sometimes say strange things that deceive the heart.
Reach me that ammonia bottle, do you hear me, Ungawa?
His name's Mahamo.
Look, there are only so many names I can remember. It's much easier if I just call you Ungawa. All right, my little native? Wonderful. Yes. This is a pretty place you've brought me to, eh? Christmas Day at that. Of all the... Oh, but I suppose it seems all right to you, you heathen, to be here on Christmas Day.
We are here on day appointed, Mr. Woods. It is a feast day of your people.
Oh, yes. It is a feast day of my people. I myself make a fine brandy wine. It's sort of a sherbet. A wine sherbet.
I myself make a cracking Christmas pudding.
Of mine also.
Is it though? But they'll do business first, yes?
Get cracking.
They must first do that.
And they'll bring their ivory with them? Their pretty, pretty white ivory?
You're enjoying that far too much.
I suppose it's actually more of an ivory white. Guess that's why it's called ivory. What?
Every man will bring ivory.
The islander answered with a smile, gleaming and wide.
Wonderful. How soon will they be here?
Has not the sun risen? They are on their way.
I hope they'll hurry. The sooner off this cursed island of yours, the better. Seriously, I haven't had a good bath in weeks. I smell like dirty seaweed.
You should see yourself in a mirror.
But then I suppose you're used to that, eh? Yeah. And take all those things out and arrange them. Neatly, mind you.
In certain circumstances, it is right that a man be humoured in trifles. Mahamo, having borne out the merchandise, arranged it very neatly. Thence detached itself, little by little, an insidious sound of a drum beaten.
Is that them?
That is they.
Look, don't get grammatical with me.
Sounds of chanting were a now audible accompaniment to the drum.
What's that they're singing?
They sing of their business.
Oh, I'd have thought they'd be singing of their feast.
It is of their feast they sing.
Now look here, is it the feast or is it the business? Make up your mind, boy.
It has been stated that Mr. Williams was not imaginative.
No, I say.
Oh no, you stay put.
But a few years of life in climates alien and intemperate had disordered his nerves. There was that in the rhythms of him which made bristle his flesh.
It was of their feast. It was of you they sang.
What? Oh, now look here.
Cried Mr. Williams in his voice of a man not to be trifled with.
Look here, if you've got a... Oh, is that a javelin? Oh, applesauce. Run! No! My leg!
Ooh, that's gonna sting in the morning.